The most consequential religious upheaval in English history began with a king who simply could not take no for an answer. Not from his wife, not from the Pope, and certainly not from God. Welcome to History Decoded. I'm Prof. Marcus.
And I'm Ellie. Professor Marcus, today we're talking about Henry VIII, the king with 6 wives, the man who changed the religious map of Europe. But I have a feeling you're going to tell me the story I learned in school is not quite right.
Ellie, the story you learned in school is not just incomplete, it's been sanitized into a cartoon version of itself. We reduce Henry to a fat tyrant who chopped off his wives' heads. But the real story is one of the most astonishing chapters in the entire history of power. How one man's obsession with a son broke 1,000 years of religious unity and created a new church that still exists today.
Okay, so let's start with the version I was taught. Henry VIII was a Catholic king. He wanted to divorce his first wife. The Pope said no, so he made his own church. That's basically it, right?
That's the skeleton. But here's the part that history class never told you. Henry VIII did not see himself as starting a new religion. He died believing he was a devout Catholic. His quarrel was never primarily about theology. It was about power, about succession, and about one woman who failed to give him what he believed God had promised him.
Wait, so the man who created the Church of England thought of himself as a Catholic his entire life?
Absolutely. And this is one of the most persistent myths in history, that Henry was some kind of Protestant pioneer. He wasn't. He despised Martin Luther. In fact, in 1521, Henry wrote a book attacking Luther's ideas so fiercely that the Pope gave him a special title, Defender of the Faith, Fide Defensor in Latin. And here's a delicious irony. British monarchs still carry that title today, even as the head of the very church that broke away from Rome.
So the Pope literally honored Henry for defending the faith, and then Henry turned around and ripped England out of that faith? That's wild.
It is one of history's greatest reversals. But to understand how it happened, we have to understand Henry the man, not the bloated tyrant of his later years, but the young prince who seemed to have everything. Imagine the year 11509. Henry is 17 years old, newly crowned. He's tall, athletic, handsome. He composes music, he writes poetry. He speaks multiple languages. He's the Renaissance prince that all of Europe admires. And then he does something that shocks everyone. He marries Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow.
Catherine of Aragon, she's the Spanish princess, right? The daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, the same monarchs who sent Columbus to the Americas?
Exactly right. And this marriage was never supposed to be Henry's. Catherine was originally married to Henry's older brother, Arthur. But Arthur died when he was just 15, leaving Catherine a widow at 16. For 7 years, she lived in England as a political pawn, waiting while her father and Henry VII, the old king, argued over her dowry. When Henry VIII took the throne, he married her, partly out of genuine affection, partly for the political alliance with Spain.
So the marriage starts as a love match, or at least a strategic one. When does it start to go wrong?
Almost immediately, in one crucial respect. Catherine gets pregnant soon after the marriage, but the child is stillborn. Then she becomes pregnant again and gives birth to a son who dies within weeks. The pattern repeats again and again. Catherine endures multiple pregnancies, and each time the baby dies or is stillborn.
That's heartbreaking. As a woman, I can't imagine the physical and emotional toll of that. But I'm also thinking this is exactly what kings feared. Without a male heir, the whole kingdom is destabilized.
Precisely. And this is the counterintuitive truth we have to sit with. The English Reformation was not born in a theological library. It was born in the blood and grief of a royal marriage. Henry watched his wife endure loss after loss, and he began to ask a terrifying question. What if God is punishing me for marrying my brother's widow?
Wait, that sounds like a convenient excuse for wanting a younger wife. Was that genuine religious guilt, or was he just making a rationale?
Now you're thinking like a historian, Ellie. The honest answer is probably both. Henry was genuinely tormented. There's a passage in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, that says if a man marries his brother's wife, the marriage is cursed and they will be childless. Henry, who was deeply religious, believed this applied to him. He thought that's why God had denied him living sons. And the Pope had granted a special dispensation for the marriage originally. But Henry began to argue that the Pope had no authority to override Scripture.
So Henry is not just chasing Anne Boleyn, which is the story I always heard. He's genuinely afraid he's living under a divine curse.
Exactly. And Boleyn enters the picture around 1526. She's sophisticated, magnetic, educated at the French court. She refuses to become his mistress. She holds out for marriage. And Henry, already desperate for a legal way out of his marriage, becomes obsessed with her. But here's the nuance. Even without Anne, Henry was already pursuing an annulment. Anne accelerated it and gave it a human face.
So what happens when Henry asks the Pope to annul the marriage to Catherine?
Now we arrive at the great political tragedy. The Pope at the time was Clement VII, and here's the problem. Rome had just been sacked in 1527, and the Pope was effectively a prisoner of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And Charles V was, drumroll please, Catherine of Aragon's nephew.
Oh, no. So the Pope literally cannot grant the annulment because if he does, he angers the most powerful man in Europe, who happens to be the estranged wife's nephew.
It's a staggering geopolitical knot. The Pope is caught between two kings, Henry of England, who wants his marriage dissolved, and Charles V, who will not allow his aunt to be humiliated. But the Pope cannot afford to anger Charles, so he did what bureaucrats have done throughout history. He stalled.
And Henry is not a man who tolerates stalling.
Henry waited and waited. He sent ambassadors, wrote letters, threatened, pleaded. This is called the King's Great Matter, and it dragged on for years. The woman he loved, Anne Boleyn, was growing older, in her late 20s, which in that era was dangerously late for childbearing. Henry was desperate, and in that desperation he found a solution that changed world history.
And that solution has a name, doesn't it? Thomas Cromwell?
Thomas Cromwell, a brewer's son who rose by raw intelligence and ruthlessness. He looked at this stalemate and saw something no one else did. The problem wasn't the marriage. The problem was the entire system. Why should an English king answer to a bishop in Rome at all?
So Cromwell didn't solve the theological question. He changed the question entirely.
Precisely. Most people assume Henry just declared himself the head of the church in a fit of rage, but the actual historical record shows something very different. Cromwell engineered it through Parliament. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 didn't just make Henry the head of the Church of England. It legally severed all ties with Rome. It was a masterstroke of political engineering, make the king supreme in his own realm, and the annulment question disappears. Henry doesn't need the Pope's permission anymore. He grants himself an annulment.
Hold on, so you're saying everything I learned about this was wrong? It wasn't a simple break. It was a parliamentary revolution that fundamentally restructured where power came from.
And here's the part that history class never told you. In making this move, England underwent one of the greatest shifts in its constitutional history. For 1,000 years, the king was king because the Pope, acting as God's representative, crowned him. The king's authority ultimately came from Rome. Now suddenly the king's authority came from Parliament, representing the nation. That's a genuinely revolutionary idea, and it would echo down through the centuries.
So the Church of England is born not from a spiritual awakening, but from a king's need to remarry, a minister's political genius, and a pope's geopolitical weakness. That's almost too absurd to be true.
History is often absurd, Ellie, but the human cost was devastating. Here's the tragic irony. The woman he did all this for, Anne Boleyn, failed to give him the son he needed. She gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, the future queen, but then suffered miscarriages, and Henry's eye began to wander.
And this is where the six wives story turns very dark.
Let me give you the roll call of human suffering. Catherine of Aragon was cast aside, sent to remote castles, and ultimately died in isolation, refused even a messenger from her daughter Mary Anne Boleyn, was accused of adultery, incest, and treason, almost certainly fabricated charges, and beheaded by a French swordsman in 1536. Jane Seymour, wife number 3, finally gave Henry his son Edward, but died of infection days after the birth.
3 wives, 3 tragedies, and it gets worse, doesn't it?
Much worse. Wife number 4, Anne of Cleves, was a German princess Henry married after seeing a flattering portrait. When she arrived, he found her so unattractive that he called her the Flanders mare. They never consummated the marriage, and he had it annulled within months. She was the lucky one. She received palaces and a generous income, and was treated as his beloved sister. Then came Catherine Howard, a teenager, who was accused of adultery with real evidence this time, and was executed in 1542. And finally, Catherine Parr, a mature, intelligent woman who outlived him and narrowly avoided arrest for her Protestant sympathies when Henry was in one of his paranoid rages.
So for the women in Henry's orbit, the great matter wasn't just political maneuvering, it was literally life or death. And I think that's what we forget when we learn about this as a dry historical event. These were real women, mostly very young, whose fates were entirely in the hands of a man who demanded absolute obedience.
And that's why this story still matters today, Ellie. Because the so-called English Reformation was not primarily about people's deep spiritual convictions. It was about one man with unchecked power remaking the world to get what he wanted, and millions of ordinary people had to live with the consequences.
What actually happened to ordinary people? The monasteries, the churches, this affected everyone, right?
Profoundly. Henry didn't just change the church's leadership, he dissolved the monasteries. Hundreds of religious houses were closed, their lands seized and sold to the gentry. Monks and nuns were turned out, sometimes with tiny pensions, sometimes with nothing. The monasteries had been the social safety net. They fed the hungry, sheltered travelers, provided medical care. All gone in under a decade.
And the money went where?
Into Henry's treasury, and into the pockets of the nobility who supported him. But here's the dark irony. The dissolution created a new class of wealthy landowners, and many of them wanted even more radical religious reform. Henry had opened a door he could not close. The Reformation went far beyond what Henry ever wanted. Protestantism, Bible translation into English, the stripping of church rituals. By the time Henry died in 1547, England was a powder keg of religious conflict that would explode into civil war during his children's reigns.
Wait, Henry's own children had to deal with the chaos. This isn't just a story about one king. It's a story about how one man's choices created a century of conflict.
Exactly. Henry's son Edward VI was a radical Protestant boy king who died at 15. Then Mary I, Catherine's daughter, tried to drag England back to Rome by force, burning hundreds of Protestants at the stake and earning the name Bloody Mary. Then Elizabeth I, Anne Boleyn's daughter, created a compromise church that tried to be broad enough for everyone, and the Church of England she established, with its Book of Common Prayer, its archbishops, its cathedrals, is still a major force in the world today.
So every time we see a royal wedding at Westminster Abbey or hear about the Archbishop of Canterbury, we are literally watching the legacy of Henry VIII's marriage crisis. That's incredible.
And here's one more counterintuitive twist. For all his obsession with a male heir, Henry's daughters became far more consequential rulers than his son ever was. Edward VI ruled for just 6 years, and as a footnote, but Elizabeth I, the daughter of the woman Henry executed, became one of the greatest monarchs in English history, ruling for 45 years. Without Anne Boleyn, there is no Elizabethan age, no Shakespeare, no defeat of the Spanish Armada, no expansion into the New World.
So the unborn son Henry wanted so desperately was essentially irrelevant. His unwanted daughters define the next century.
History has a dark sense of humor, Ellie. The dynasty Henry tried to secure with a son was saved by a daughter he never wanted.
Professor, before we wrap up, if someone remembers just one thing from this episode, what should it be?
This. The English Reformation was not a theological awakening. It was a collision between one man's desperate obsession and an immovable religious system. Henry VIII didn't set out to change world history. He set out to get a son, and in doing so, he broke a 1,000-year-old spiritual empire and created a new world, a world where a nation's church could answer to a king instead of a pope. The consequences ripple through our world every single day.
And if you think about it, that's a terrifying and useful reminder about power itself. One person's personal crisis, combined with unchecked authority, can reshape the world for generations. Thank you for walking us through this, Professor Marcus.
Thank you for listening. And if you want more stories like this, the real messy, morally complicated history that school never taught you, subscribe to History Decoded and hit the bell. New episodes every single day.
See you next time on History Decoded.